I'll just wait a few more moments before we kick off because I see the number of attendees still increasing. All right, I think we can kick off. So hello everyone and welcome. We are very excited to have you join this second part of our series about pricing fundamentals for publishers. So I'm Lisbeth. I'm leading the European activities for Matter, and I'm very happy to have Madeleine Swingelberg and Arvid Chiftel, joining me today and to bring in all our pricing expertise and to answer all your questions also at the end of the session. Today we have part 2, but there is definitely more to look forward to. We will also have a third part about some pricing case studies, so pricing solutions that we've set into practice at publishers. Maybe just a short word about who we are. With Matter, we are maximizing publishers' revenue since 2002 with solutions in strategy, analytics, and technology. This means that we have more than $6 billion of revenue under our management at more than 400 clients globally. And we do that with a mission because we want to empower publishers to unlock sustainable revenue and profit growth, allowing them to prioritize and fulfill the journalistic mission. What are we going to talk about today? First, we will assess the emerging trends in pricing. Then we will revisit the pricing maturity curve. Then we will explore value-based renewal pricing and also evaluate how pricing can be used as a lever for digital growth. And finally, we will review the best practices for pricing success. But let's do some housekeeping first. This presentation will take about 25 minutes. We will have a Q&A after our presentation, but feel free to already send questions into the chat that you find on the right at any time during the presentation. And following today's presentation, we will email you a cheat sheet covering today's takeaways, followed by the recording, and you will also receive a short survey for your feedback. So I think we can kick off then. All right, so in today's media landscape, revenue sustainability is a top priority for publishers. So let's explore emerging industry trends supporting this. If we look at the graph based on our own industry benchmarking report with US data, but from Q1 this year, we see that consumer preferences change, with half of total circulation being digital-only subscriptions. Now we are talking in terms of volume, because when we go look in terms of revenue, despite these shifting volume trends, the digital revenue is not keeping pace with the print volume decline. So print revenue is still critical, because the digital transformation takes time and revenue from digital is lagging due to far lower prices. So digital revenue will need to double at a minimum to help offset the decline in print volume, which is quite a challenge. If we look at long-term sustainability, we really need to take care of both things. So we see that publishers need to rebalance their efforts for their print and their digital products. So on the print side, it's about preserving the revenue and extending the lifespan and making sure that operational excellence and so that we succeed in that, so we can reduce operating costs. On the digital side, we need to translate the effective print pricing strategies that we know to digital platforms to be able to boost revenue, but also to boost volume especially since the audience declines and digital subscriptions for a lot of publishers starts plateauing. Nevertheless, there is no magic solution, but pricing is a real big lever, a key lever for revenue. We put here in this table the revenue levers on one side and the cost levers on the other one. With the revenue levers, you see pricing, you see churn management, you see product bundling and diversification and advertising. On the cost side, you see the print delivery model, the technology stack, outsourcing of non-core function and process automation. But pricing will always be a key lever to grow your revenue and your profitability. Now, if you look on how and you can do your pricing strategy, there is some kind of maturity curve, and it's super important as a publisher to grow on this maturity curve. So first of all, you have publishers that see pricing as a project. That's a simplified, high-level pricing approach. We get together once a year, we think about the prices, we look at a competitor, we take some decision, but there is no consideration of customer value or personalization or something like that. The next step is pricing as a process, and this is also known as first-generation targeted or dynamic pricing. Here, publishers rely on high-level market research and customer surveys to be informed about the value perception, and with a minimum set of variables on which pricing decisions are made for different segments or customers. And the highest stage is pricing as a system, and at this level of maturity, publishers are really deploying value-based pricing. And this focuses on rich audience and customer data to optimize the pricing according to lifetime value. Lifetime value, super important word. Arvid and Madeline will definitely come back on it. This kind of pricing strategy leverages advanced analytics and predictive modeling, and the pricing is also tailored to the segment or the subscriber level. And of course, this is also where algorithms can come in, and where you will need some kind of automation as well to make it all manageable within your organization. Before passing the word to Madeline, I would just like to hear from the audience here. There's a poll that has been coming up to see where in the pricing maturity curve you are. Do you work in your company more on pricing like a project, more like a process, or more like a system? All right, I see that it's the project and process is about 40% each, and about, we're moving around. Half of people in the room use pricing as a process, 10% as a system, and about 30% pricing as a project. So I think we have the right audience here to kick off the next steps. The word is yours. The floor is yours, Madeline.
Yeah, thanks, Lisbeth. All right. So, hi, everyone. I just want to talk a little bit about targeted pricing, particularly around those renewal subs. And there's a lot to go through, so I'll just jump right into it. The thing about pricing is that not everyone values the subscription the same amount. And so not everyone is willing to pay the same price. And what I really like about this graph is it shows subscriber willingness to pay. And you can see that we have a few variety of price points that subscribers are willing to pay. And so I want to walk through a couple of different pricing scenarios and kind of highlight the pros and cons of each one. So with scenario A, we have a publisher who is offering an across-the-board increase of $30. And while, they're offering the lowest price that a subscriber is willing to pay, so this these subscribers who are willing to pay $30, this is great for them. There's actually subscribers who are willing to pay more, so $35, $40, $45. And so ultimately, this publisher is leaving revenue left on the table because they're charging a price lower than what some subscribers are willing to pay. And then we also have scenario B, which is similar to scenario A, and that is an across-the-board price increase, but they've upped the price to $40. And so this is a little bit higher. It's good. There's less revenue being left on the table. You do still have some revenue being left on the table at $45. But what's really concerning here is that you have subscribers who are not quite willing to pay $40. They're only willing to pay $30 or maybe $35. And so the subscribers who are not willing to pay $40 are going to churn. And so this pricing strategy is kind of leading to unnecessary churn that probably could have been combated or avoided from a different type of strategy. And so ultimately, neither of these scenarios are going to be ideal. What we really want to see is scenario C, where a publisher is offering a few different price points, catering to the fact that subscribers are all willing to pay a different price. And so with this method, we're really going to see churn minimized, and we're going to see the optimal revenue yield here as well. And so this is going to be the best method moving forward. And I want to dive into this a little bit more over the next few slides. So what's great about a targeted, value-based pricing is that it scales across the subscription lifecycle. And ultimately, it can be used within acquisition, it can be used within retention, and it can be used within renewal as well. And so you can really utilize it across all aspects of the life cycle and tailor it to kind of what your needs are within that stage. And then you can apply these price points at a few different levels. So you could do it at the subscription product level, or you could do price change recommendations based on, segment or attributes like the product or bundle or payment method, subscription term, customer group, maybe a combination of a few of these types of attributes. And this segment level is actually most commonly used amongst EU publishers. They're almost always using segments, and that's great. And then you have individual as well, which is based on the individual's price elasticity. And this one's actually most commonly used amongst US publishers, where they're doing more subscriber level price points. And so for the purpose of today's session, we'll focus on the strategies and tactical requirements for implementing this value-based pricing in the renewal stage particularly, and then at the individual level will be highlighted as well with some case studies. But again, value-based pricing can be used at any of these levels, product, segment, or individual. So I'll try to make sure that I'm highlighting all of that as I kind of go through. So as we saw in the diagram a couple of slides back, you really don't want to over or undercharge a subscriber, which ultimately is going to have additional churn, or it's going to leave revenue on the table. And I think, with analytics, you can help identify customers with high or low sensitivity to price, which will enable a more accurate approach to targeted pricing, and then in the long run, improve performance and retention. And so the big question is, well, what is pricing sensitivity? I feel like I've said that so many times, and I think Lisbeth mentioned it as well. So pricing sensitivity, also known as price elasticity, you may be familiar with either or. They're both the same, and ultimately they come down to how do subscribers react to changes in the price of a good or a service. And so in this case, that good or service would be their subscription. So when we're talking about pricing sensitivity, we're saying how are subscribers reacting to a change in their subscription price. And since we can't really know, what a subscriber's true or exact willingness to pay is for their subscription, although it would make things so much easier if we could just immediately know what someone is willing to pay or what they're thinking. We do ultimately have to use some sort of proxy for their price sensitivity and for their demand for the product. And so what we'll typically do is kind of assess their expected retention under different pricing scenarios. And so Mather over the last 20, 25 years has analyze this data for hundreds of publishers to really understand historical retention trends given different price increases. And we'll do this for each market as we kind of analyze what their price increases should be. And so we'll use that history to inform our assessment of expected retention, and thus how price sensitive a subscriber or a segment may or may not be. So this is a graph I love. I use this all the time. And what it does is it visualizes how retention varies with and without a price increase. And so we can see that there's a slight decrease in retention with a price increase, so that point C, the gray line. And the variance of that gap it changes based on pricing sensitivity. And so it can grow with a less optimized approach to pricing or shrink with a more targeted approach to pricing. So in other words, an across the board increase can cause a larger variance when the price is set above, what a subscriber is willing to pay, similar to what we saw in that first diagram. And while a targeted approach will work to narrow that gap as much as possible by kind of tailoring to what each subscriber, each segment is willing to pay. And so when you're thinking about value-based pricing, you also need to think about what factors kind of go into what increases and decreases the likelihood of accepting a price increase. And so we've done a lot of analysis on the different factors and kind of highlighting here a few examples that are common but not required for the pricing analysis. You could be using all of these or maybe only some of them, and that's okay. Every market is going to be a little bit different, and the makeup of what goes into their value-based pricing is going to be a little bit different as well. I think that's the great thing about value-based pricing, is that it's unique to the market. And so it's not a one-size-fits-all type of analysis. So just to highlight some of these really quickly, you have things like product, print versus digital, delivery frequency, billing term, payment method, auto pay status, and current price. Current price is pretty standard. I would say while most are not necessarily required, current price is usually one that we always want to include. And a lot of these subscription characteristics are actually going to just come straight from one's circulation system. So it's usually pretty easy data to get to. And then we also want to look at things like the subscriber behavior. So what are they doing as a subscriber? How does that impact their pricing sensitivity? So looking at things like tenure, how long have they been a subscriber, digital engagement. So this is kind of one word or two words that encompass a lot. So we could look at things like recency, frequency, how long someone is reading an article, how many different articles they're reading, how many different types of articles they're reading, newsletter engagement, newsletter signups, things like that. So digital engagement is a little bit broad, but again, we would tailor it to the market, and that's the best recommendation, is to kind of see which engagement factors are going to have the biggest impact. So complaint history, transaction history, so things like starts, stops, over time, calling in, anything like that. And then the last one is demographics, and this one's a little bit broad. So this is most commonly used in the US. We use US Census data for age and income at the zip code level. It's not as commonly used abroad. I would say almost never any type of demographic data is used in the EU, and even in the state of California is a little bit more limited. But internationally, there are some clients who may provide us with some third-party data that gives more high-level demographics, so not quite as granular. So again, each of these are going to be kind of tailored to the market, tailored to what's possible, and tailored to what everyone is comfortable with as well. And so then lastly, we have macroeconomic conditions. So these are things that, impact the subscriber's willingness to pay, but something that the subscriber cannot control. So for example, inflation, gross domestic product, unemployment rate, these are all things that will impact their disposable income and thus their willingness to pay, but it's out of their control. And so those are sometimes really good things to include in the analysis as well. And so with all of these factors, the magnitude of the impact of these variables is going to vary across publications. It's going to vary across regions. And it can also, and almost always does, vary across markets within the same parent company as well. So again, it really comes down to one size does not fit all. It's very unique and is tailored towards the subscriber base at hand. And so while the magnitude of these impacts kind of change and vary, and we see that all the time, there are some common trends that we tend to see across the industry with a lot of these factors. So for example, the longer you've been around, the more likely you are to accept a price increase. And so we thought it would be fun to throw a couple polls into the, I guess, chat, if you will, to test your knowledge and kind of see what you guys think for some of these factors. We should have, there we go. So which subscriber group is more sensitive to a price increase, print or digital subscribers? And so in this case, when we say print or digital, this would be digital only. It would not be a hybrid. Hybrids would fall under the print category. Give everyone just a second to answer. Oh, it's changing just a little bit. All right, well, it looks like we got a lot of answers in. I will go ahead and go to the next slide. And it's actually print subscribers tend to be more sensitive to a price increase. So through our benchmarking and through ample A/B testing, we've been able to kind of track price sensitivity and price elasticity with each of these increases. And we find that that number is always a lot lower for digital subscribers. They're actually more willing to take a price increase. Part of the hypothesis around that, I mean, there are a few different reasons why this is likely the case. Print pricing has been around a lot longer, so there's more opportunity for pricing fatigue, and there are operational challenges that have caused some more aggressive price increases. I think the makeup of the type of people who are a print subscriber versus the digital subscriber are also really different. And with digital subscriptions in particular, at least I can speak from my own experience. I'm used to having my subscriptions increase in price every single year. I have Netflix, I have Hulu and Spotify, and those things are constantly changing. And so, excuse me. And so media and newspaper subscriptions are no different. I think with digital subscriptions, people anticipate that there will be changes. And then kind of to Elizabeth's points about the average rates and the revenue, right now digital rates are a lot lower. And so I think that could also be driving it as well. But ultimately, what this means is there's a little bit of opportunity to stress test your digital subscriptions a little bit more, put a little bit more pressure, test out different ceiling rates, test out different rates in general, and see how subscribers respond and do some A/B testing there for sure. All right, so we have one more question that we thought would be interesting, and it's, how are highly engaged digital subscribers more or less price sensitive? We'll wait and see what we get for some answers. So far, it's 50-50, so quite interesting. Give it one more second. Ooh, lots of changes going on here. All right, so it looks like a lot of people are getting their answers in. I'll go ahead and go to the next slide so we can kind of keep things moving. But so highly engaged digital subscribers are actually more sensitive to price increases than their non-engaged counterparts, and holding all else constant. And I know that that's something that usually surprises a lot of people. But A/B testing kind of reveals that they are more sensitive. We've seen that with tons of meta-analysis. And we hypothesize that this is likely due to highly engaged subscribers being a lot more aware of their subscription, a lot more aware of their price, and they just tend to be a little bit more engaged with all the inner workings, not just with reading their subscription. I would say kind of the interesting part about highly engaged subscribers is while they are more price sensitive, so that means that they are more likely to stop if they're given a price increase relative to someone who is less sensitive or less engaged. They're actually more likely to retain in the absence of a price increase. And so it does follow the trend that you would expect. If you're not pricing anyone, a highly engaged subscriber will stick around a little bit longer than a non-engaged subscriber. But once you start giving price increases, that's where it starts to flip a little bit. All right, so this is my last slide a little bit before I hand things over to Arvid. But ultimately, I just wanted to wrap this section with saying, each subscriber or segment will have a different perceived value of their subscription and thus a different level of pricing sensitivity. And so it's really important to consider this when you're assigning an increase. By giving an increase based on the willingness to pay, you'll maximize revenue and you'll ultimately reduce churn, which is everyone's goal in media sustainability is maximize the revenue and reduce the churn. And so this graph really just shows how many different price points one could offer given the wide variety of pricing sensitivity within a subscriber base. And so you have subscribers on both ends of the spectrum. It's normally distributed, and the subscribers with the lower price sensitivity are getting the higher increases, and the ones on the higher end of the spectrum with high pricing sensitivity are getting the lower average increases, which is really just targeting their willingness to pay and assigning the price points accordingly. All right, so now I'm going to pass this off to Arvid, and he can speak a little bit more about how this looks in practice with some case studies.
Yeah, thanks, Madeline. Yeah, really great stuff. And yeah, so I'll talk about a case study for a publisher where this was applied for actually a long period of time. We're going to drill down into the last 3 years of performance for this publisher. But first, a bit of a background. So this is a fairly large publisher, about 200,000, just under 200,000 subscribers. They're in the United States. They're independently owned. You can see some of the metrics there. They're just under half of those subscribers are digital only. But you can see the ratio of revenue is still very much three quarters of that revenue is still print, and that's just due to the ARPU differences. And so one of the things that this publisher was really seeking to do was to utilize that print revenue and invest that. It's still a very profitable business on the print side, but for the time that revenue is still there, that 74% of print revenue invested into the digital growth side of the business. And so their goal was to really extend that runway for print as long as possible. So they were able to take those profits and reinvest them. But just going back to the pricing and the application of the value-based pricing, some top line stats at a high level, that the total volume, including print and digital, declined about 12% over a 3-year period. Due to applying pricing on both print and digital subscribers, the top line revenue actually grew 3%. And you can see that the average ARPU grew about 18% over that period of time. And so we'll drill down into actually what that means for print and digital, but that's the top line performance. And really the takeaway from here is that kind of value-based pricing, that data-driven pricing that Madeline talked about, it can really help just grow the top line revenue even as there's pressure on print volumes. So on the next page, we're going to drill down into the print side of the business. And so if you remember the top line volume decline was 12%, you can see the print decline was actually almost 30%. That's that bottom dark blue line. So over 3 years, they lost about 30% of their print subs. They were applying they continue to apply the value-based pricing. So they're using digital engagement, they're using complaint history, tenure, demographics, all those things, and they're still able to keep, they weren't able to keep revenue flat for print, but they were able to only see a 6% decline in revenue over that 3-year period. So it's a pretty remarkable impact where they can still lose almost a third of their subscribers, but only lose 6% of their print revenue. So that again extends that print runway for as long as possible, and allows them to invest in digital. So on the next slide, we have the digital trends, and you can see here everything's going up, but again, same key metrics: revenue, volume, and ARPU over 3 years compared to January 2021. And really, the digital subscription growth was pretty strong. They were able to grow about 25% over that 3-year period. More importantly, they were also applying the value-based pricing to those digital-only subscribers. And you can see revenue actually grew almost double that, almost 50% in digital revenue growth. So the pricing, the value-based pricing is, it's kind of a different goal in mind. So with print, you're really trying to extend that runway as long as possible and maintain revenue where it is while print volumes decline. With digital, you're really trying to grow everything. You're trying to grow volume. You're trying to be intelligent about who do you price when, because you don't want to cut off that volume growth before you can get those subscribers engaged and past that 2 or 3 year point of their subscription history. But again, very successful case study. And some of the things that they did really that drove a lot of that, not just the volume, but the revenue growth on the digital side, was investing in the product effectively. So you can see some points there, but really they invested in technology. They made the checkout process really, really easy and simple. Site speed, those kind of fundamental things. They also made a very strong user experience on the site. And those are kind of net new investments. But even more fundamentally than that, they invested in their content. So a lot of newspapers struggle with the cost side of the business. And for this publisher, they were able to essentially maintain the newsroom and actually reinforce the value of the content. So just a case study, just to sum up, again, the print revenue is really a great way to reinvest in digital, and it can be a great driver for growth as well on digital. So I'll happy to answer any questions in the Q&A after the webinar, but I'll hand it back to Madeline and Elizabeth to take us to conclusion here.
Yeah, thanks, Arvid. I will just have a couple more things before we head into the Q&A. So just wanted to kind of summarize some tips for you guys, because with any pricing strategy, renewal pricing kind of requires tuning over time, and what works at the beginning won't work forever. And so just kind of highlighting that with the next couple of slides. So there are a few stages of maturity in pricing, and where you are somewhat kind of determines what your focus should be. I think, with the early stage where a lot of digital subscriptions currently are, the focus right now is more in bringing the average rate up. So for example, we've talked about this, Lisa's mentioned it, with the volume being a little bit higher and trending higher than their print counterparts, but with rates still being really low, publishers should focus on acquisition prices. In this stage, publishers also tend to focus on step-up pricing, which is a really good way to drive the average rate up. But I do think that it's worth noting that targeted pricing, that value-based pricing can be done no matter what stage you're in. So it can be done in the early stage and it can be done in the established stage. So if that's something that you're interested in and ready to jump into, you certainly can, even if you're in the early stage. And then as you advance, you're likely focusing on maintaining volume and focusing on profitability. You may still have some low acquisition rates, so you're wanting to get those subs to more profitable levels. You're probably starting to stretch your ceiling prices a little bit. And you're really starting to stress test to see how subscribers respond, and you're tracking that performance with some A/B testing. And then as publishers mature their pricing strategy, they start deploying more value-based pricing across the life cycle and evolving from higher level product-based pricing to more granular targeting at the segment or individual level. And I think also with the established, especially where print is right now, some of the challenges come from operational infrastructure. And so that's led publishers to kind of focus on driving up the floors, which is a really good way to drive up the rate and kind of restructure the way that they're thinking about pricing. And then just one last slide before we jump into the Q&A. I think it's really important to note that, don't try to boil the ocean. The most effective publishers are going to realize this and work for more incremental victories over time and really stay focused on their strategy. And so excuse me, there are a few ways that they can do this. And so the first being strategic planning. So you want to align internally on organizational objectives. You want to set goals and develop a roadmap that you'll actually follow. This is a really crucial step. I mean, oftentimes there can be competing objectives, and it's really easy to stray away from that roadmap. So you really want to align internally and make sure that you can stick to that roadmap. And then once you've solidified the strategic planning aspect, you can kind of look more towards data and analytics. Find your level of data maturity and capabilities, as we talked about on the previous slide. At this point, publishers often opt to outsource pricing analytics to data science experts in order to make sure that they're focusing on their core mission, which is producing quality journalism. And so you can do that as well, finding trusted partners. And then lastly, once you've got the analytics, once you have a plan, you've got the data to support it, you want to make sure that your technology can implement it, and you want a way to track it. And so reporting on these analytics is just as important as the pricing strategy itself. A/B testing, I've mentioned that so many times, but this is really a great way to do this. A few things and key performance indicators that you can look at whenever you're doing this A/B testing are things like revert rates, the stop rate, particularly that incremental stop rate. So how are targets, people who are getting that price increase, stopping relative to people who are maybe not getting that price increase, their business as usual group. And then also looking at things like the ratio between the actual renewal price point and what the goal price point was. And then lastly, fail fast, but keep your strategy in sight. Publishers should really embrace the failure, I'll quote failure, that comes with testing and experimentation, being able to really iterate quickly and as lightly as possible so that you can find what works and tweak it versus really getting bogged down by finding the perfect strategy and waiting for those perfect conditions. You want to be able to stress test. You want to be able to do A/B testing and just adjust when you see needs to do that. And so finding good partners to do that with is also a really great way to do that. All right, so I'm going to pass this over to Lisbeth now.
Yes, thank you, Arvid and Madeline. It's time for our Q&A. So you have on the right the option to chat and ask your questions there. So far, we haven't received any questions, so I guess everything was clear. No, I hope that you guys have some questions. I suggest to keep it open one more minute or so. But then if you do have questions afterwards, just reach out to us.
If there are any questions, I'll actually ask Madeline one on the last poll question was about digital engagement for digital subscribers, and it was kind of counterintuitive that more digital engagement is actually more price sensitive. Are there things like that on the print side that are like not, or I guess what is that on the print side? And also are there other counterintuitive or kind of not what you might expect, patterns on price elasticity?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So we don't see that kind of, to me, the engagement group is one of those like big popping questions where you're like, whoa. And we really don't have that on the print side. I wonder if it's just because print's been pricing so long that everything is kind of what you would expect because it's been that way for so long. And so maybe you just think of it that way. In terms of kind of what the counterpart would be is, so in digital, we look at digital engagement. That's one of the biggest factors in influencing pricing sensitivity. So, I mentioned that every market's a little bit different and the magnitude can change, and it definitely does. But we see time and time again that digital engagement for digital subs is kind of the most indicative of how they'll respond to a price increase. And on the print side, we tend to see that comparison be towards things like delivery frequency. But that actually follows kind of the trends that you would expect. So for example, a 7-day subscriber is less likely to stop given a price increase than let's say like a 3-day subscriber. So the more days you have, the more you're getting the paper, the more engaged you are, and the less likely you are to stop. The only kind of difference would be sometimes Sunday only tends to be very not sensitive and that's obviously the least amount of days, but there's usually some other incentives going on with the Sunday only that drives that.
Okay, thanks a lot. That was a good question, Arvid. Thanks. Well, there are no new questions that came up. Oh, there is one. Yeah. Do you have any thoughts on aligning renewal pricing with acquisition pricing for legacy subscribers? Madeline, Arvid, who wants to take this question?
Yeah, I can talk to this a little bit. So I'm assuming, I guess I want to make sure that I understand your question completely, but essentially you could align them. So if you're thinking of like a step up price where someone already knows what their next renewal rate would be, I think that's really common. But it doesn't have to be. I think one really great thing about kind of being able to fail fast, if you will, is that maybe you can kind of, once you've acquired someone, see how they're responding, see what their behavior looks like, see what their segment might be like, and then assign a different price point than you would have initially thought. Because when you're acquiring subscribers, all of them kind of somewhat look the same, but once they actually become subscribers, you can see that, they're all very different, and they all may fall into their own segments. They all may fall into their own willingness to pay. Arvid, I don't know if you had any other thoughts to add there, or if you interpreted the question differently.
Yeah, no, that's I mean, it's really about lifetime value optimization, and I think we had a slide even page 16 in our PowerPoint that talked about the different points in pricing. So there's the acquisition point, which is kind of that the question is about. There's the first step up or the first retention point, then there's a renewal, which we spent most of this webinar talking about, is that third renewal optimization. But yeah, I mean, it's always the existential battle between ARPU, volume, and revenue, and that's the kind of the battle that publishers always have to struggle to optimize. And in some cases you can try to pick two, or you can try to optimize for one. But if you use an LTV framework and you look at the aggregate LTV that your offers are getting, so you can pretty quickly align to, does it make sense to do $1 or €1 for 6 months? Does that actually bring in enough volume? And is the churn at that first step up still okay enough that you're getting enough revenue in year 2, year 3? So, and it can vary by channel. So if you're targeting people who are coming to the site directly, if you're doing paid acquisition channels, so that can be a different outcome, because you have to consider the cost for acquisition as well. So it's like, I guess to answer the question, yes, there should all be aligned. And there's some materials we can follow up with just to show some case studies around how do you optimize that. But the short answer is it's really LTV based framework that you use to optimize.
Okay, thanks everyone for joining us today, and we hope to see you all for the last part of the series. Please reach out to any one of us if you want to know more about pricing strategies or how we can help you on maximizing your revenue. Thanks a lot. Bye bye.